This then is the guidance film for the Year 7 extended homework project on Henry VIII and his ministers. Wherever Key Stage 3 students come across in their chronological studies content that might be part of their GCSE course in Years 10 and 11, we will provide extended content in order to ground them in both the skills and the content of that particular unit. The homework will be carried out over several weeks, and as you can see, some guidance is given as to how students can appropriately structure their work as they undertake it. The teachers will give guidance as to when the work should be submitted in order to see that the work is being undertaken according to that rough timeline. Okay, so the first task undertaken is going to be a research task based on chronology and the content identified here at the top. Students are going to need to research this particular content, and all of this is lifted from the GCSE specification. So all the research they do now will ground them for their future studies, and an idea of how they can set that work out is provided there. Now, of course, as with all the other activities, if the student thinks there's a different way in which this work can be presented, we fully encourage them to be creative and undertake that task. Then we have the key individuals, all listed, and then some interpretation of source work based upon Henry VIII. And from these we require the students to make inferences. All of this skills work was undertaken in the first half term of their Year 7 studies, so this is all skills-based work that they are familiar with. The context just now happens to be Henry VIII and the Tudors. Then we have a gap fill activity on Cardinal Wolsey, the first of Henry's 2 ministers that they need to study. And then in-depth study of particular elements of the specification, in this case the Eltham Ordinances. The students need to read the evidence, the information provided, and then identify 2 specific features of the Eltham Ordinances. Success criteria are provided. Then we have the peer marking or self-assessment in order to judge how the students are writing up this particular piece of work, and some guidance here on pathways. Moving in then on to the second of Henry's key ministers, Thomas Cromwell, who succeeded Cardinal Wolsey after his failure to deliver on Henry's great matter, the annulment or divorce from Catherine of Aragon. Here's the activity that they have to undertake, keywords that they need to fill in. Then some further in-depth work on why Anne Boleyn was executed. Why was the queen that Henry pursued earnestly for so long so short on the throne? From the research students undertake, they have to identify the most to least important reason. Again, an activity that can be undertaken in a different way should the students choose to do so. And then the students will undertake a 12-mark essay-based question, the format of which they are familiar with, based upon why Anne Boleyn was executed. This, of course, can be linked back to the first 3 most important factors that they've identified on the reasons for her execution. Students will then be expected to use those 3 paragraphs and write them in a PEA structure. So we are looking for the written style here as well as the accurate content. I would strongly advocate that students get in the habit of colour coding or labelling their paragraphs to identify the 3 elements of point, evidence and analysis. Then we have the means of assessing that. And then the 5th part, religious changes, the creation of the Church of England. Some contextual evidence provided on the previous page, and then the key events in the break from Rome. The students read these, fill in the gaps, missing words provided. What was the most important religious change based upon this activity? Students tell me why. And then the only real serious rebellion against Henry's religious reforms, the 1536 Pilgrimage of Grace. Some evidence provided. Activity here. They're all causes and consequences. The students need to identify which. Carry them over onto this particular activity, ideally chronologically, and and then carry out some source-based work on grace. Read the question below, have a go at the question. The main cause of the Pilgrimage of Grace was opposition to Henry's religious changes. How far do you agree? Explain your answer. You may use in the following, and 2 bullet points provided, and this is a 16-mark question. Again, this is a format that students have practiced and will be familiar with. They now have to transpose those skills into this particular question, provided to conclude that, and then the assessment criteria at the end. For further research, all the materials required for the GCSE course are on the school's shared learning area, and there is also additional GCSE support and links to wider resources at www.historynetwork.co.uk, where the Plymstock School History Department content and GCSE specification is provided and expanded upon.